I always reveled as a child in spending a lot of time in nature. Nature has always been a place of contemplation and relaxation for me. Whether it's a field or whether it's here in the low country, with the Spanish moss and the marshes and the water, it's always been a place of recharging. And when you walk the landscapes here in Beaufort County, when you're out on Hunting Island, for example, by the sea and the forests, and then you go into town and you see the fabulous mansions that were built on the expertise and the labor of the enslaved people from Africa. You know, it's just right here written in the built landscape and the natural landscape. As I began to work on a project that had to do with enslavement, my first question is, who am I to do this? African American people know well the legacy. It comes from their families. It's white people who kind of stand back, and you sort of just call it slavery, label it as slavery, and the word even begins to lose some of its power and meaning. I began doing some touch drawing on the theme of place here in Beaufort County. For me, it was a way of trying to immerse myself in that era, that process of enslavement, trying to gain some little glimmer of understanding. And what emerged from those touch drawings was an enslavement narrative.
The prints themselves tell essentially the narrative of the transatlantic slave voyage. The idea for Visions of Home came from Katherine Ziff when she scheduled a meeting with me my very first semester at Wake Forest. She had recently produced her Bisimbi series of prints, and those had been published in an academic journal. But Katherine was looking for another venue to maybe publicly exhibit them.
One of the tenets of arts-based research is to put it out there for public to see, for comment, for learning, for discussion. I looked around on the Wake campus for a place to do that.
And she explained what her artwork was, how it related to the culture of the South Carolina Lowcountry. We thought immediately, well, maybe we can do something about that, something connecting heritage in the US to cultures back in Africa, and if there's any maybe connection between her works and Museum of Anthropology objects. And we wanted to make sure that if we're presenting a depiction of Gullah culture, that it also reflected the present day, that it reflected contemporary Gullah people.
I'd seen a little ad for the Red Piano 2 Art Gallery. So we drove out to St. Helena Island, went in the gallery.
The gallery represents Gullah artists from South Carolina and beyond.
Every wall and every surface is covered with art.
There are two-dimensional paintings, there's kind of outsider art, found objects and collage work.
Paintings, sculptures, artifacts, all kinds of things.
Really, it represents kind of all of different aspects of Gullah communities. When we first thought of the exhibit, we had envisioned that we would really be explaining the transatlantic slavery narrative. That narrative pivoted quite a bit when we began working with the Red Piano 2 Art Gallery.
Maybe a little variation to
we conducted interviews with Mary Mack as well as other artists connected with the gallery and discovered that most of the artists, most of the Gullah perspective, did not want to necessarily talk explicitly, or certainly not exclusively, about enslavement, but rather the focus should be on celebration of culture.
Several themes emerged: resilience, waters, spirit, family, creativity.
Mary Mack, though, did a lot of the hard groundwork of reaching out to artists, of explaining what our exhibit would be about, and making sure that they kind of bought in with the idea that they were invested in what we wanted to do, that they had a stake in it, which we felt was very important.
And within several months, there was a large body of work from all kinds of very distinguished artists ready for Andrew to go pick up. And we agreed, because of the size of the space, we would not go with maybe a more traditional gallery setting of one picture lined up, all this white space around it. We would go with salon style, which is what Mary has in her gallery.
Hi, Kate.
Andrew, good to see you.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Yes,
So
good to see you again.
Yeah.
So we ended up putting the exhibit in our back gallery, like we talked about,
We did.
and it
Yeah.
focuses on kind of the themes that Mary had really emphasized and that you had been emphasizing with kind of a dual exploration of both celebration and kind of the more complex and hard histories of the Gullah community.
Exactly.
So I don't know if you
So
had
impressed.
seen this, but when we were getting the paintings from Mary, she actually gave us a copy of this Gullah Bible to use.
You have it. And here it
So
is.
we're actually going to let people handle it and read it to get a sense of the linguistic differences between the Sea Island Creole and Standard English. That's really when we launch into your works. We put all 5 sequentially. I know this is kind of how you intended them to be seen, maybe a little farther apart.
Oh.
But essentially in this sequence, with
which then leads into
right.
and
Well-
the salon style work.
is there anything that kind of strikes you?
Oh, there's so well the themes. The beginning with resilience, images of resilience, and then these, of course, are the waters, which enters into how to make a living, spirituality,
Sure.
casting the nets, all the nets that are handmade.
Well, also in the spirit section, the baptism in Village Creek not only brings in the centrality of the water, but of course the kind of religious community. Because that's what baptism is. It's bringing
Into the
another
fold.
person into that
Yeah.
community. Like Mary Mack's Seeking Place, right? And the
Yeah.
idea of seeking in Gullah religion. I always think that's an interesting
Yeah,
phenomenon.
these are. Mary has several paintings here. The Seeking would be kind of your coming of age time period, in which you would pray under the guidance of an elder, and it was a time of quiet. You would go out into nature under the live oaks, with the Spanish moss. It's a contemplative time of seeking God and seeking your place. One thing that's important, of course, we've talked about, important for counselors is to achieve a level of cultural competence. And so when we begin to explore other cultures outside our own, which was part of my motivation for the work that I did here, we begin to learn something about Gullah culture, for example. So it's very, very important to have that familiarity if you can. If you are working with someone who is from this culture or is familiar or embedded somehow in the culture, it can help you as a counselor.
Those ideas
No.
might resonate with that
They
person.
will resonate, and you will have a better understanding of how to be a counselor for that person.